I felt we had to talk with Ralph Twice's widow to see how much she knew.
Please go away. Please go away. I don't want to answer any more of your questions.
We're sorry to bother you at a time like this, Mrs. Twice. We would have come earlier, but your husband wasn't dead then.
Welcome back, everyone, to S1E1, the show where each week we pick a different sitcom, watch just the first televised episode, and forgetting anything we might know about the future run of that show, rate it and decide if it's a show we want to greenlight or cancel. This week we're going to be talking about Police Squad. Police Squad went 6 episodes with only 1 season on ABC. Today we're talking about episode 1, which is called A Substantial Gift, The Broken Promise, originally airing March 4th, 1982. To get things started, I'm Jay Gags. With me, as always, the boys, most of the boys, Gordo, Joe, and Ferg. Nick's not here this week. What's going on, guys?
Hello.
Heyo.
Just like your mother when she gets out of the shower.
All right, so...
I thought you were going to go with the dad-eating monster.
Was Daddy Heaven? I was like,
there's a lot of quotes. Before we get any further, I just want to remind everyone, go to S1E1pod.com. That's where you can find all the links to where you can listen to us, everywhere you can follow us on social media. S1E1pod on Twitter and Instagram. Give us a follow there. Say hello. We like talking to you guys. But yeah, to move forward, Police Squad. Gordon, this is your pick, correct?
Correct.
And any particular reason?
I don't know. I thought... Is this the first show that I have back that I'm, like, from the shadow ban realm?
Ooh,
No, I think you had one in between.
For those of you who are fairly new to our show, there's a lot of times where Gordo... So we alternate taking picks for the show, and then we'll, like, kind of do group picks once in a while. Gordo keeps betting away his picks, which is something that none of us do. But Gordo's always so confident and always so wrong, and somehow loses his pick almost every round.
Has never once worked. No. So I figured that... I forget where we were talking about this show.
We're talking about Naked Gun and Leslie Nielsen.
Leslie Nielsen has
Correct.
come up on our show a bunch.
Yeah. He has. And it's a show that I've wanted to pick for a while because I'm so curious to see... Because this was his first foray into comedy, isn't it? I want to say?
Airplanes before this, I believe.
I
think this is the same year as maybe Airplane 2, the sequel. I think Airplane's like 79 or 80.
He may have made this, and then Airplane came out, and that's why it got picked back up. I forget. See, this is why I should have watched that special right before.
Either way, I saw that he starred in the sitcom, and how can you not pick it? He's a legend.
So I'll say I've never seen this. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it before.
I have.
Nope.
I was going to say, Joe, you were the best bet for this.
Yeah, this is very much in my wheelhouse.
So I knew that this was kind of the predecessor to the Naked Gun films, but I had no idea that it was like in the way that he plays the same character. I didn't know it was to that degree.
Isn't his boss also the same person in the Naked Gun?
A few different people show up. I don't think it's his boss, but
he shows up in the Naked Gun though, doesn't he?
Does he? Who else is in it?
Whoever plays his boss. That he's always like, and my boss was there.
Oh, just to confirm, Airplane was the 1980. This was 1982.
Okay.
The scientist plays the same character in the movies. I know that.
Okay. Been a while since I've seen the Naked Gun.
Wait,
movies.
you know who doesn't show up? OJ.
No, not here. A couple like characters, I guess, are similar in their role, but different people are playing them. And
there is a Nordberg in the show. He's just not in this episode.
There's a Norberg in the show. There's a Nordberg in the movies.
And the actor who plays Norberg in the TV show is one of the very first people to ever do full frontal nudity in Playgirl. He went full dong.
Oh, what a fun fact.
Yeah.
Full dong, huh?
He hung dong. I looked it up. I looked up the pictures.
I love that that's become part of our show is hung dong.
That's great S1E1 trivia there.
So I don't even know where to pivot from there.
Speaking of
we can pivot to being
dong,
sad that Leslie Nielsen never did a full frontal nudity scene in his Dracula cape. How great would that have been?
He totally would, though. If it ever came up, he would do it.
Oh, he would think that was so funny. I think we should start this, though, is to talk about the creators of it and everything else they've done and all of the joy these three men have brought our lives. So the creators of this, it's three guys. It's Zucker, Abrahams, and Zucker. So they did all the Naked Gun movies. They did Mafia. They did Top Secret. They did Airplane, and they did Rat Race, the movie that Ferg and I constantly quote on the show. Don't play Hitler's harmonica. So we
It's
do
Hitler's
have an
harmonica.
actual organic John Lovitz in this one. The big horny bird who was one of the mascots of our show.
Oh, big horny bird.
Yeah, those guys are just geniuses and worked for 30 years making the funniest stuff.
That
Good
was
for
when,
them.
Parody was like an art back then, and now it's like blah blah blah, whatever's popular. Like doesn't have to.
Oh, yeah,
Isn't
not
that-
another whatever.
One scary movie came out, I feel like the art of parody really shifted, and it became to a point where it had to be extremely topical.
Scary Movie 1 and 2 fell back into what we're talking about, but after the Wayans brothers left, it's like
Yeah.
they forgot how to do it.
Right, because all of those follow the same formula.
Yeah, I'm forgetting how to use words. Every movie that came out after those ones, like once 3 and 4, then you had Not Another Teen Movie, Epic Movie, all those movies. They all were like cookie cutter, same thing. They followed such a basic storyline, a pop culture reference out of nowhere. Like,
Where they lost it in those movies is they weren't parodying things anymore. Where, like, if you think of Loaded Weapon,
Yeah.
like, Loaded Weapon is so
Oh,
funny
I
because
love
it's
Loaded
parodying
Weapon.
all of those movies. Hot Shots and Hot
Hot
Shots Part
Shots.
2
Yep, hard
are
shots.
funny
yeah.
because of what they're parodying. Even if you go early, Airplane is just parodying all the 70s disaster movies, right? Like
Mhm.
Airplane 75 and Towering Inferno and all those movies. So
I didn't know that.
But to go full circle, Leslie Nielsen played the president in the Scary Movie movies.
to go full circle also, O.J. Simpson was in Towering Inferno. Oh, also, just in case if anyone was wondering what OJ was doing in 1982, I did try to look it up. He was in between movies. I saw an interview of him saying that he was no longer going to even think about playing football. That was past him. But he was happy for his next movie that was coming out, which was called Cocaine and Blue Eyes. Do you know what ruined O.J. Simpson's life? Cocaine and Blue Eyes. That should have been a fucking moment where he went, maybe this isn't something I look into anymore.
well, I guess this is a good time to continue forward. But actually, one thing I do want to mention is, so I looked it up on Rotten Tomatoes, 90% tomato meter, 88% audience score, so kind of jointly liked between critics and people. And then IMDb gave 8.4, which is like a user rating usually on IMDb. So a well-liked show, which is kind of surprising because I mentioned at the top of the episode, 6 episodes, only 4 aired like in order. And then the other 2 eventually got aired through like just random syndication. Like they got played, but the ABC gave up on this extremely early.
Yeah, I wonder why.
I have to think that they came back into favor and fashion and being played again after the first Naked Gun movie did so well, because there's no way I would have seen it on TV before the first Naked Gun movie. You know what I mean? They must have been playing it on Nick at Night and stuff.
Well, yeah, we weren't alive when the show came out, so for sure.
Well, I
you
mean,
would've
like,
seen it. Yeah.
it wasn't like syndicated, like they were just throwing it on randomly. I think
Right,
it
but
must
yeah.
have been like, hey, let's throw this on every once in a while when a new
And then
movie
once
comes
the
out.
Naked Gun movies did so well, they were like, well, we have this property, like we can just air it, like we own the rights. So yeah, it makes sense.
It's a shame they didn't make more.
Yeah, you can only do so much though at that point, even with syndication, because you only have 6 episodes in the can. So like, what can you really do?
I remember reading somewhere that like it just works so much better as a movie. So that
Yeah.
the show wasn't working.
I mean, we'll get into it obviously, but I mean, to show my hand a little bit, I think it does work as a show. So
The crazy thing about this working as a show is, if you think of the movie, they're taking very big swings, but I feel like they take as many big swings in this half-hour TV show as they do in one of the movies, and they kind of spread it out a little bit more. It's non-stop insanity in the show.
I think the show versus the movie, they're using a little bit more subtlety. Like there's a lot of like wild jokes, but it's not as cartoony as it was when it got to the big screen.
Well, I think they definitely had a bigger budget for the
sure.
movie. And I think that because of the time slot that they had, they only had a half hour versus what was Naked Gun, like an hour and a half, we'll just call it.
Yeah, there's probably 90 minutes
like-
each.
Yeah, so you can afford to be, I guess, a little bit more stealthy with it, because you want people to keep coming back. You kind of want people to buy the property and keep rewatching it, and so forth and so on.
Well, I
So-
think with shows like this, is wild as some of the stuff that happens in it is, I think the art is really in the dryness and keeping that like
deadpan.
100%.
and that's what makes it work. So like when it's not too wacky, but those jokes are in there, I think that's kind of like what makes it really click. Because we mentioned Nick at Night, and we think back to all those like Dragnet and all those shows that we did watch that were in the same vein as a show like this, but on the serious side, and they really nail that vibe. You know, we'll get into it probably a little bit more as we start talking about the episode itself, but just the way it's shot and everything, it's like well done. It was, you know, for television, you know, decent budget behind it. Like everything looks really clean. The sets were nice. I think they just did a really good job with this show and creating the vibe of those like 70s era police shows, but bringing that comedy in there and in a, you know, in that really dry way, the deadpan. I just thought they married the two really well.
And isn't that why Leslie Nielsen was picked for it? I think that's the genesis of him
Yeah,
as a character, because he was so dry. He was like a serious actor. I think Ferg knows a
Yeah,
little
he's
bit
in like
more
Prom
about that.
Night and a bunch of other movies where he's like a detective in for real though. Like he's not like a funny detective. He's like a real cop trying to solve stuff, and it works. So I think when you're that good at that, you don't even have to be funny half the time because you can just deadpan it and then it works, right?
But yeah, there's a lot of movies, like comedy movies, where if you want to get like good comedic performances, you either have to be a funny comedian or just a great actor. And you look at, it's a wild difference, but you look at a movie like Dumb and Dumber, you know, only one of the two is actually a comedian. You know, Jeff Daniels is just a good actor.
Yeah, I mean, I think it shows, especially to go with Jeff Daniels, he was in within a year Dumb and Dumber and Speed in two wildly different roles that were
Right.
two humongous movies that he was great in both of them, right? Like, you gotta have the funny guy to do funny stuff sometimes, but sometimes you just need someone who's good at doing anything,
Right.
and they'll always be funny in it.
Yeah, I guess to get into like the episode itself, might as well get, you know, started. It starts with the actual intro of the show, and you kind of see that siren on the top of the police car moving through the city. You know, at first there wouldn't be a lot to tip you off in the very beginning that there's going to be comedic until they start introducing characters. So you see, like Frank, who's Leslie Nielsen's character, first is introduced, and there's a shootout, and like, okay, whatever. And then by the next character, there's another shootout, but then there's just a guy on fire.
They had me
What?
hooked the second I saw
Me
the guy
too.
on fire.
Also, the immediate raising of the stakes. Leslie Nielsen shoots his, like, you know, 6-gun, and then when they cut to Al, it's a machine gun shooting at his desk inside of a police station, and then a guy on fire. Like, wait, what the fuck?
And then like Rex Hamilton is Abe Lincoln.
And then Abe Lincoln starts shooting, and that's when I
it's
lost
never,
it.
he never enters the actual episode. There's never an Abe Lincoln character.
Also, Abe Lincoln getting shot, but it just knocks his hat off and makes him angry. Like, what a great turn of history that is.
And then it's like, and special guest, Lauren Green. And who's, most of you, I guess, would know him as the father from Bonanza. I guess was probably his biggest role that I can think of.
Bonanza.
And,
Yeah,
like,
he's
you
in a
just
bunch
see
of
him,
stuff,
like-
but like he's definitely
He's
Bonanza.
credited as just Stabbed Man. Not in the episode either. So the special guest is just a part of the intro.
and that's a recurring theme in the show.
Also, on top of all, like, the funny shit, that's such an iconic theme song now, too. I love the theme to... I'm gonna keep saying Naked Gun, even though it's obviously the Police Squad first, but...
Yeah.
That Naked Gun theme song is great.
It's
Now-
also that point of view from on top of the car in front of the cherry cop light, you know, like that
Yeah.
moving, like that's so iconic.
Can you imagine being like a Lauren Green fan and being like, oh man, he's in the show? That's awesome.
Like Ben Cartwright from Bonanza's gonna be in this? He just gets
And then, like,
stabbed.
The end of the episode's like, what did they cut a scene out? Like, what the fuck happened?
Here's the thing about this show, though. I think it's a great reference point to bring this up. Like, why I don't think this show would work now is most people can't watch a whole episode of something without looking at their phone at least once for something. And you would miss so much watching this if you looked down for even a second. So I think it's kind of a funny idea to be like, wait, did I miss Ben Cartwright being in this? Because,
Yeah.
like, you may have, like, turned to say something to somebody and you realize that there's so much happening at all times that he may have walked by, then you didn't even see him.
Right.
Furthermore,
Yeah.
can you imagine being a big fan of Abraham Lincoln and being like, oh, he's in this, and then he doesn't show up?
And then you're like, he's alive!
I thought he was killing vampires.
Between this and Bill and Ted, Abe Lincoln had a real good revival of
Yeah,
80s.
He did in the 80s. Party on, dudes!
Well, actually, I mentioned that. What was the official title of that? The Abe Lincoln Vampire Slayer movie or
Abraham
whatever.
I think
Lincoln
it was-
Vampire Hunter.
Yeah,
Yeah, Hunter.
That's when like the Daniel Day-Lewis movie was out, like at the same time, and it was like in theaters we had 2 Abe Lincoln movies, granted very different, but out at the same exact time. You're like, what's going on?
Do you know how fucking mad Daniel Day-Lewis must have been about that? Like, Daniel
Oh my
Day-Lewis, who
God.
is like known as the most like immersive actor of all time.
Yeah,
where,
big
like,
method actor.
Somebody walks on set during the Lincoln movie wearing sneakers and he won't talk to them. He's like, what are those contraptions on your feet there? It's like, all right, buddy, let's not do this right now.
I'll
Great
say
actor.
The Daniel Day-Lewis one was probably more exciting than the vampire one. Man, that movie's boring and shouldn't have been.
Meanwhile, did you see both of them or just the vampire one?
I'm saying the vampire one was really boring.
But you saw it.
I did.
But did you see the Daniel Day-Lewis one, which is probably the
No.
more well-regarded one? See?
No, I did
So-
not.
I didn't see the Abraham Lincoln one because at that time we were getting burned with all of these like biopics that were not good, like J. Edgar or The Aviator, that I wanted to be good, that I was like, I can't sit through 9 hours of Abraham Lincoln now after not enjoying those other 2.
Which one is the one where Christian Bale plays Dick Cheney? I wanted to see that one.
Vice.
Yeah.
That's really, really good.
I wanted to see that one.
Is that Jeff Tremaine, I think, did that?
Oh, really?
It's one of the Jackass
Wow.
guys, or Spike Jones, or it's some of that. It's one of that crew. I think it's like a Dick House movie.
Probably.
Someone's gonna hear
probably-
this and be like, "You're way off," but
I was gonna say if it's
Because
either,
movie.
it'd probably be Spike Jones out of the 2. But
yeah, Spike Jones makes the most sense. It's one of those. I have to look it up now. I'm sorry. Oh, Adam McKay. It's Adam McKay, the guy who does all the stuff with Will Ferrell.
okay,
Also,
okay.
the one
Oh,
person
okay.
you didn't say.
Yeah, the guy from Anchorman, Talladega Nights, all that stuff. But like, you don't expect that when you go into this movie about
Abraham
Dick
Lincoln.
Cheney. It's like very interesting. It's a very interesting and well told and funny movie.
We get to the first scene and we see a man walk into the Acme Financial Credit Union, and we see inside Jim and Sally. Sally's begging Jim for money because she needs another orthodontist visit, and she's playing the role very serious. And like she's begging money, like almost as if like in a way that like you would think she had like a gambling problem and needed someone to lend her money.
That's what I thought at first. And I
And
was
Jim's like-
what?
Yeah, and he's telling her that he can't because essentially it sounds like she's not asking Jim for money. She's asking Jim to take money from the credit union to give her money.
Yeah, a little like under the table.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
he says he has to manage the books.
Yeah, he has to fix
Yeah, there's
the
an auditor
books.
coming in.
So she goes and sits at her desk, and then this man walks in to cash a check. While like that transaction's going on, it just cuts over to Sally at the desk, and she ends up pulling out 2 guns. She pulls a gun out from a drawer, and then she goes into her bag and gets another gun and starts to load it. And like all the meanwhile, like you can hear in the background what's going on with the transaction. Like this dude's just trying to cash his check, but like if you're listening to the actual
Yeah.
dialogue, it's almost like he's going to a doctor's visit to open up the
Yeah.
account. He's telling him to turn left and cough and open his toes.
Which means that he had that man pull his pants down and he grabbed his balls and had him cough after
you wanna-
checking if he had 2 major credit cards to make sure he could cash his payroll check.
If you want to get your check cashed, you do what you got to do. So all this is going on while Sally's getting this gun ready. And then the guy cashes his check, and then she just points over at him and shoots him. And then they do this like slow motion, just tight shot of his face after he gets shot. And he's like, the faces he's making at the camera, which are not that of like a man who gets, he's like looking dead into the camera, by the way, at some point.
And he starts like licking.
Sticking
and,
his
like,
tongue out. Like, yeah, I mean, it was very funny.
This
Very
scene-
good face acting.
This is great face acting. I feel like too, so they make like there's like a music cue and there's no like dialogue from the other people, and I feel like that's not a directorial decision. I feel like this dude was doing this and everybody was laughing so hard.
Oh, yeah.
They were like, we have to just put music over this because you can just hear the entire set laughing at you. It's fucking wild.
And like when he goes down, Jim looks over and he's like, Sally? And then she shoots him. But
And I like how
as-
he's still
yeah,
stamping
as
all the
he still has
stuff.
work to do. Yeah. So as he's like dying, he's like still, stamping papers and filing things. And eventually he goes down, but after, I don't know, completing what little work that he thought was essential and more important than his life.
I thought that was going to lead to a joke that was like, you're fired. or something like the stamp was going to be like you're fired or like, terminated or
Yeah.
something. I didn't expect him to just be doing the last of his day's work.
Or like void a check that he made out to her so she could pay her
Right.
bill. Like,
Reminded me of in Mafia when he gets shot in the head, but he finishes his meatballs and then
Yes.
dies.
That-
no,
Yeah.
as you said, same creators, so you could see how that same humor like bleeded from one project to another.
Yeah.
One of my absolute favorite things to make is, like Italian Sunday gravy. And I always make the meatballs. And every time I put the meatballs into the gravy, I just think of in Mafia where they open the tennis ball canister and that's where the meatballs fall out of. I think about it every fucking time.
Now, quick question: when you make meatballs, do you like to give them a little pan fry before you put them in the gravy, or do
I
you?
do.
Okay,
You
I
gotta.
prefer that way also,
This
but
yeah.
stupid ass gravy talk. It's sauce.
I've been saying gravy my whole life.
That's spaghetti sauce.
now there's the argument either way, and we won't get
depends on
into it
what's
too
in it.
much. And then there's somebody who's like,
Gravy is brown.
my
That's brown
grandmother's
gravy.
from Italy and she said sauce. I don't fucking care. Like my grandmother says gravy, so I'm gonna continue to say gravy.
Yeah, my grandmother said gravy. That's what it's going to be to me forever.
Now, and the argument
My-
was made before, and I don't think there's a technical one way or another, but the argument was always you're cooking it with meat in it, ergo it becomes a gravy.
Yes. That's when my grandmother would switch from sauce to gravy. If it was just straight tomato sauce, it was tomato sauce. But,
But if you're dumping meatballs in there, now we're in gravy territory because there's meat in it.
I mean,
What's weird is I'll call gravy when I'm making gravy for Italian dinner gravy, but I'll put the qualifier of chicken gravy or turkey gravy or brown gravy for every other gravy.
Yeah.
Like it's the lesser gravy, it needs an extra explanation.
And like if you were to buy like a pre-made one at a supermarket, I would probably say like get a jar of sauce.
yes.
It's like it has to be like gravy is like prepared. It
Correct.
Yeah, like
doesn't come in a
ragu
jar.
is sauce.
Right.
Ugh,
But
barely.
the secret, she's a mind.
Anthony.
But
That
Wasn't
was
that
Northeast Italian
Prince?
corner, everybody. Sorry about that.
so anyways, when Jim finally dies, Sally runs up and like grabs one of the guns and wipes it down and get her fingerprints off. But then, by the way, still holds it with her bare hand and places
Yeah.
it near the first guy, the guy cashing the check. And she just like starts screaming and runs off. Now, was the scream for comedic purposes or for her to sell this idea of she just witnessed a murder?
to
He
sell
was
it.
selling. I
Sell the
think.
idea. I will say though, at least she didn't wipe. Like the smart thing you do in these situations is you put the gun in somebody else's hand. We randomly were watching The Departed the other day. It's a great movie. I just randomly it came on and we got sucked in. And the end scene, spoiler alert, where everybody gets shot, he wipes off every gun and then calls the cops. Like, you know what's more suspicious? When there's 4 dead bodies and every gun is just on the ground completely wiped off. And
It
only
couldn't
one
have been
guy
any of
walked
these
away.
guns. These are all clean.
Yeah, right. It's like, wait, that seems like an oversight to me.
So now in the next scene
And
we
Mark
see
Wahlberg just has bags on his feet.
I love that.
Sorry.
This is such a funny why Mark Wahlberg backs up.
So in the next scene, we see Sergeant Frank Drebin, who's played by Leslie Nielsen, and he's driving through the city, and he's narrating the scene, kind of introducing himself. So he does a lot of voice narration over scenes throughout the show. And he says, there's been a recent wave of gorgeous fashion models found naked and unconscious in laundromats on the west side. Unfortunately, I was assigned to investigate holdups at a neighborhood credit union.
The best is the secondary joke here, though. And he's like, luckily, I was on my way there after doing my laundry.
Yeah.
So they throw
Yeah,
the
yeah,
little
yeah.
joke in that he was up there.
Yeah, he
and
has
they-
laundry.
So he went over just to like check it out. Oh, he knew it's happening, but
They call it back later, too, because later on when you see him driving, he just has laundry in his car.
Yeah.
So, he just
Guy,
keeps
yeah.
going, trying to find
so
the
whenever
naked
this
women.
guy has free time, he's just driving up to this part of the neighborhood just in hopes of seeing dead women in the laundromats.
Naked dead
They-
women.
Yeah,
Yeah.
naked.
And he does mention that he was doing laundry, and because of that, it took him about 20 minutes to get to the credit union, and that his boss was already on the scene. And as he pulls up, he drives like straight into a trash can.
It's a dumb gag that is used a lot. But when you just hit one trash can, the only one on the street, it is kind of funny.
He meets the captain outside, and he's briefing him on the situation. And according to the teller, who is the only witness, who's Sally, and the one that we know killed both men, what she had said was the man entered to, enter the credit union, killed the other teller, who is Jim, And then in defense, she shot the man who walked in. I believe his name's Ralph. We find out later.
Yeah.
Ralph twice.
Ralph twice.
Yes. And the weird thing is, as they're looking up, this guy Ralph has like no priors. He's known to be like a good family man. So something's already a little fishy with this story. As they're entering the credit union, you see like this body being taken out on a stretcher, and it's, I don't know, the size of like 3 men. Like
It's like 14 feet long. Just keeps going.
It's like way too long to be a single body in there. Which at first I was trying to justify. I was like, oh, maybe it's both bodies. But then when you get inside, you see Ralph's body still inside, and like one of the detectives is like taking photos with it and posing.
He's posing with it.
And you also see like the chalk on the ground. Like there's one that's in the normal like shape of a body, but one's like an Egyptian drawing.
Yeah, one's like a hieroglyph.
And it's like it's as wacky as all this stuff is. Again, it's played very serious. So a lot of this stuff is just kind of like, they don't put heavy emphasis on it. It's just kind of there. So like the tone
it's there and they move.
Yeah, and the tone of the show kind of works with Leslie Nielsen's like kind of straight narration, because everything he says is always so goofy, but he never says it in that tone. It's always in a really serious demeanor.
And that's the real Dragnet thing too, right? He's doing the Joe Friday voiceovers that you know as being super serious.
When they walk in, Frank gets introduced to Sally, and he begins to ask her some questions. And he offers her a cigarette, and he just goes, "Cigarette?" And she goes, "Yes, I know." And he just has that like weird reaction, like she didn't understand that he's offering one, and she just thought she was acknowledging that he's telling her that this is what a cigarette is. Which
they use that joke in one of the Naked Gun movies, but it's still funny here too.
Yeah, they stole a few jokes from the show and put them in the movies. From there it goes into like this who's on first routine.
This is a mindfuck, this whole scene.
It goes on for a while, and I don't want to quote the whole thing because it goes on for quite a bit, but
I couldn't keep up with it.
So it starts with Sally saying, "Well, when I first heard the shot, and as I turned, Jim fell." And then Frank looks over and finds out he's the teller, Frank. "What? Jim Fell's the teller?" "No, Jim Johnson." "Who's Jim Fell?" "Oh, he's the auditor, Frank. He had the flu, so Jim filled in." "Phil who?" "Phil Din. He's the night watchman, Frank." So it's a lot of like word puns. Jim Fell is a person, but they're saying that Jim fell. And then Phil Din is filled in. I'm not doing it justice by doing a one-man show trying to tell you what the dialogue was, but this is going on for quite a while.
It goes on way too long, but it's
because somebody shot twice. Who was shot twice? No.
One guy's last name is Twice.
Yeah, the guy who cashed the check, his last name is Twice.
And there's someone named Once.
Yeah, and someone else's name Once, and it just keeps going and going.
How many takes must this have taken to get right? I imagine it was a whole day of shooting.
Probably not a whole day, but I'm sure it wasn't a one take.
Probably easier for them with cue cards and shit. Like, because there's no way you could remember all that word jumble.
I wasn't paying attention to the editing, but there must be like cut shots for coverage so they can seamlessly edit together.
Yeah. There's also we think we know how he did it. "Oh, Howie? He couldn't have done it. He's been gone for weeks." No, Weeks is the controller. So they're doing a lot of this bit, which is, again, it was very funny when you're watching it.
They do this joke consistently too, where you get people with these sort of names in it, but Howie did it made me laugh so stupidly hard.
Besides, we all know it was Enrique Palazzo.
I was waiting for somebody to say it. It's either that or somebody has to mention getting pushed down the stairs at the World Series in a wheelchair.
So now, as they're leaving, Sally's still sitting there and she's crying until they leave. And then she stops abruptly because, we know as the viewer already that she did it. It goes back to Frank's narration where he says that he thinks Sally would make a good witness if there was this would ever go to trial, but something didn't quite sit right. So we decided to go back to the squad to see what the homicide and lab had. So now we see the lab, which is labeled as such, the lab, on the door if you read the door.
Yeah.
And inside we have like what looks like this kind of like Mr. Wizard, Bill Nye situation where we have a scientist inside teaching the kid about condensation.
And that's killed me.
The just like on your mother when she gets out of the shower.
Glistening tiny beads of
And then, yeah, Frank enters, and that's what cuts this lesson short. And when the child is excused from the room, the two get to talking. And then we find out if Sally's story was true, the bullet in Jim would have been much deeper if the holdup man was standing where she said. So now he walks him over to this area where they have two guns propped up on like stands facing stacks of videotapes to demonstrate how deep the bullet goes on varied distances. And these are tapes of Barbara Walters interviews for whatever reason. So we get
Topical?
the first one.
Probably topical at the moment.
At that time, yeah, for sure.
It'd be like
So-
mid-Barbara Walters. She did it for like 50 years.
Right. So, I mean, she was so popular like when we were at an age where we would recognize that. So this being
Barbara
before we were born.
Walters.
Baba Wawa?
So they have these two guns at varied distances from the videotapes. And they shoot the first one. It's like, it gets like maybe half the tapes, blow up from it. And he's like, see, it's like goes right up to about the Bo Derek, Paul Newman stuff.
And through Burt Reynolds. My
It's
boy
right
Burt.
through Burt Reynolds. R.I.P. Burt.
All right.
R.I.P. bud.
And then he shoots the other one, which is where Sally claimed that the man was standing, and it just eliminates all the tapes. It's right up to the point where she asked Katharine Hepburn what kind of tree she'd be.
Now, is that a real thing?
I
Shooting
assume
videotapes?
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. What are these videotapes? I didn't do the extra research to check, and I'm sure it's a very available thing, but I can only assume that that's probably like an iconic thing from one of her interviews.
I've seen enough Barbara Walters interviews to have, like, your brain just goes to, like, what do you think happens when you die? I'd like to come back as a tree. What kind of tree would you be? Like, that seems very much like how that conversation probably happened, and Hepburn at that point's pretty old, right? Because you're talking 30 years past Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Was that in the 50s that movie came out?
Breakfast at Tiffany's? I think it was. Her and
Now we're
George
going to have to
Peppard.
go to the Google machine real quick. 1961, so pretty close,
61.
like about 20 years past.
That's only 20 years. Well, she wasn't that old then.
That was a fast Google.
I try. You know what the key is? I'll give you guys a little movie magic. The trick is to keep talking while you're typing it. So,
What's crazy, though, is if you think of Audrey Hepburn, I guess, then in the... Oh, it's Katharine Hepburn. I'm thinking of Audrey Hepburn. That's where I'm confusing it.
so
Yeah,
all that Googling was for
Audrey.
nothing?
Yes.
It
Because I
was
was like, wait a minute,
everybody's
61, she wouldn't have been that old. But George Peppard looked pretty old, but he's in the A-Team, and that's around this time.
time.
My brain just goes...
I was going to say, sorry for
So
all of you
many
trying to track
directions all
Joe's
the
brain
time.
at that point in time. It's like, what the fuck does that have to do with Star Wars? Star Trek, I'm sorry.
Boo.
The hate mail I'm going to get.
Oh.
So from there we get to like this next scene where we have Frank and the captain in the car again, and Frank's narration over it saying that they're headed to a neighborhood called Little Italy. Like Little Italy, like in Boston we have the North End, and there's like Little Italies in other cities, but when you look behind the car, the Colosseum is behind them. They're not
The
in Little
Roman
Italy. They're driving
Colosseum.
through Rome.
Yeah, Rome.
Now, hold on. Are we to believe, where is this show taking place? Do we
Not
ever
in
find
Italy.
out?
They're not
Well,
in Italy,
obviously not in Italy.
and you can't just drive there.
He was heading to Little Italy, so maybe that was Little Rome in the background where he was coming from.
They might whatever state they're in, they go all out, huh?
I will say that later on, I think when they're in the police squad office out the window, I think you see the Capitol building.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I didn't even notice that at that
I didn't
point.
notice that
So
either.
I think it's supposed to be around DC. But that also, with this show, it could be one of those things where they change that every episode.
Every
I don't
episode,
remember.
Yeah. So now they get to the home of Ralph's widow, trying to find out what she knew. When we cut inside to the apartment, the widow is like dusting off like a lamp, and behind her you can see the leaning tower behind her. So
Sorry to interrupt, but shouldn't it must be California, right? Because he what's it called? In the movies, they're at Dodger Stadium.
well, you can't really count that yet though, because that's a
Yeah.
whole different like. There's always retooling. You know, we
Yeah.
even see even within TV shows, sometimes when we go from the pilot episode to when it like gets an official series run, like cities will
it's
change
true.
and things like that. So, I mean, I guess because of speculation, we can say sure, but who knows exactly.
Because isn't the third one too? Isn't 33 and a third? Doesn't it end up at like the Grammys or like a big award show in LA too?
That's true.
It was probably just easier to film those in LA and be like, we're not traveling for a Naked Gun movie. We are shooting in the city we all live in.
So when we get into the house and Frank and the captain enter, they say, "Oh, we're sorry to bother you at this time, Mrs. Twice. she's telling him like, please go away, please go away. She's in mourning because her husband's dead and she's crying. And Frank goes, we're sorry to bother you at a time like this, Mrs. Twice. We would have come earlier, but your husband wasn't dead then. That was my favorite line of the whole episode. I thought you might have opened with that one. That was my favorite line of the whole episode.
I kind of wanted to go with his dialogue that he does next because I find that his sort of rambling dialogue in this scene so stupidly funny.
Yeah, so I didn't quote the line, but to get into basically what's going on is, so the captain's sitting with her and asking her all these standard questions, asking if, he owed anyone money, things like that. And she's like, no, nobody. And she says to them, like, do you have any idea what it's like to be married to such a wonderful man for 14 years? And Frank's like, no, but I did live with the man for a couple years. And he starts talking about how that sparked slurs and rumors and how this man was originally, eventually ran out of town. And like, it keeps like cutting back to the captain trying to interrogate this girl, not interrogate, but ask her questions. But Frank can't let this go now, and he just keeps talking about his history with this guy that he lived with, and like what became of him after that. It was
By
really
the end,
good.
he's living with that guy's son, who's a football player. We're like,
but it wasn't
what is
the same.
happening?
Did you say he was a football player?
What?
Did you say he was a football player?
Yeah, isn't that one of the things he says? He's a football player, like his dad. He's talking about the body. Because everything he's saying is like trying to be like a little racy, like there was some sort of sexual tension.
O.J. Simpson.
Oh.
Football
Wait, so
player?
in Gordo's world, and I love this, I'm not knocking you, I'm from pro this. He was previously
Caitlin?
living with O.J. Simpson's father as a young man, and then as time progressed, he moved in with O.J. Simpson.
With O.J.
And
I
later
guess
on
there's a
hired
world
him.
in which that could all be canon. Yes.
I love this.
I like that one of the captain's questions to the widow is, did he ever eat chop suey?
I didn't get that.
Because it's
Yeah, I
like an
didn't get it
irrelevant
either.
question. It's like one of those
Okay.
things like, it's just, there's nothing behind it. It's,
Well, also, too, as he's asking these questions, the widow is like wailing
yeah.
more and more, like, which adds to the whole like kind of chaos of that's going on in this scene.
Yeah, I mean, because like, I think she's playing it right. Like, she's playing it in a way that like, okay, your husband died. And like, so despite all the comedy, like it's a good, like for the show, it's smart because despite how they're acting, she's being realistic and they're living in kind of their own wacky world. And she's saying like, like, how am I going to tell my daughter that like her father's dead? And they're going over all these things like, tell her he went on a long trip. It's
Or
like,
they landed on a landmine.
how about
Just
a
in front
big
of her
monster
grave.
came and took him to daddy heaven? Like, imagine how traumatized a child would be. Like, that's already scared of monsters.
Tell him he was traded for Jackie Robinson.
Yeah.
Reggie Jackson.
Reggie Jackson.
Jackson,
That's
yeah.
right.
Mr.
Daddy
October.
wants- Oh my god.
But
So, I know
like,
some sports stuff.
yeah. So, and again, yeah, she's balling this whole time. And that's how that scene kind of closed out, was all these potential, like, where did he go, instead of her having to tell, her daughter the unfortunate truth. So now we get back to the next morning when Frank's returning to the squad, and it's 10 a.m. and Sally came in to like leave a formal statement. And I guess because they said the word formal, is that why she's like,
She's
in, like,
dressed
a-
up and
she's
Yeah.
like dressed up
Dressed
like
up,
she's
yeah.
going to a cocktail lounge and the stenographer's in a tuxedo and there's a man serving hors
Yeah.
d'oeuvres.
See,
your nerves really got me.
I didn't even pick up on that. I'm glad you brought that up because I thought it was just because she stole the money. She was living more.
Oh,
She's all
yeah,
fancy now.
extravagant. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing
Albert
that makes
Burns.
sense to
That,
me
that
is
one got by me.
yeah, because they said the word formal.
Yeah.
That's why they're doing this. And
See, there's so much in
Yeah,
this
there's a lot.
episode. It's like
There
every
is.
single scene that there's like the obvious joke, and then there's it's oniony. There's
It is oniony.
fine
it's interesting
layers.
because it's this like well-balanced mix of really wacky visuals at times with like also the art of subtlety. So at one point there's like these really like smart, clever jokes where like a word, if it slips by you won't get it. But then also they're driving and the Colosseum's behind them. So it's like, it's interesting how they go with like kind of both extremes, but they blend together really well. So then Frank and the captain are sitting there and they're waiting on these lab results. which are then delivered by like a 7-foot tall man and so he's like Nanny from the Muppet Babies almost. Well, I guess you're getting more. You're getting his torso, but yeah, his head's cut off.
He's Manny.
Yeah. So
this man's nickname in real life was Tiny Ron, which I love so much. But also, he's Lothar from Rocketeer, another movie that comes up a lot on this podcast. So sadly, this man goes back in time 40 years and then explodes on a blimp.
Oh,
Cool.
R.I.P.
I thought he was supposed to be like Lurch from the Addams Family.
Well,
That's
like,
the kind of vibe I got.
I mean,
He doesn't talk. He just.
I don't
comes
think
and
he's
he hands-
supposed to be anything. The joke is just this guy is fucking tall.
I think that's it. I
Yeah.
think it's simple. It's simple as just that he's tall because he's not playing it like Frankenstein, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The fact that he's tall isn't addressed in like his demeanor. But essentially, what we find out through these lab results is that the bullet penetration is showing upwards marks, and the two are face to face. This is like, at this point of the episode is when I got to thinking, oh, I like that we saw the crime, and as they're trying to figure out what happens, we actually know who did it. Because most shows like this, you're going along the ride, right? Like, if you're watching like a CSI or something, you most of the time can speculate or you have an idea who the murderer is. But
Yeah.
here we saw the crime and we're just watching them get to that point where, like, I don't know, it's like, it's so smart in a way that I don't even know if it's deliberate. But I just like that perspective because that's not usually how we see crime drama or anything like that. So it was cool to see the crime first and know who did it the whole time. You're like in on it.
It's smart.
Yeah.
It makes you perceptive to just the other stuff going on and not trying to be in the back of your head thinking, is this person the one who did it, right? Like, it gets you out of like Agatha Christie mode and you can just enjoy what's happening around it.
Yeah, it's like one less distraction almost. Yeah.
I think that's smart with the show because like when you watch like a Columbo or something like that, you're trying to figure it out, or like Murder, She Wrote, or Diagnosis Murder, or
One
something
more
along
thing.
those.
By Columbo impersonation. It's for like the two people who were gonna know that.
And then, so then after they get all this information, Frank leans into the phone and says, "Get me Pete over at Homicide. Tell him I want to meet him and a few of his men down at the Acme Credit Union." And then when they change perspective, you find out he's not on the phone. He's talking to a little person.
It's such a weird bait and switch, hot, cold, big, tall. Like, it's so wild and so funny because it's just so jarring.
That's one of those ones that, like, even though like a show like this has these twists throughout the whole episode, you don't expect it. So when they get the perspective and it's just the camera looking down on this little person, he's like, "Oh, right away, sir," and walks off. You go, "What the fuck just happened?"
I love it too because it's not punching down either. It's not making fun of that person for being a little person. It's just being like, there's a really tall person, now there's a really small person.
It's
anyway,
just,
you're like,
it's
that's
just
funny to
tricking you
see together.
Yeah, it's just the perspective is tricking you, and that's all it is.
I'm
It's
upset we
simple.
didn't get them together.
Yeah, there's like a missed opportunity.
It's simple though. Simple humor that just works. Like you don't need to go over the top with something like that to be funny.
I mean, we mentioned Dracula Dead and loving it a lot on this, but doesn't this feel very Mel Brooksy in certain
Very
times? Like
much.
those
It
sort of
does.
jokes feel very Mel Brooksy to me.
I thought for a long time that Mel Brooks did the Naked Gun movies because they're so similar to his style, but
Yeah, you
They
can.
got older.
There's a lot
He
of
did
that
not.
similar tone, sure. And then at this point of the episode, we're like right at like the dead center point, and that's when it says Act 2, Yankees won. And I was thinking about like, is that like
boo.
at that point was things like that like did they separate television into acts like that?
Maybe police shows.
Not in the 80s.
Like I couldn't remember something like if that was parody of something or if the joke was just the Yankees won thing was what they wanted to show you.
I think it's just a joke, like something to make a score joke. I think it literally is just a throwaway. Somebody made that joke to be.
Well, no, because they also do an epilogue at the end.
That is true.
They
so
do the
like,
epilogue, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that does work. But in any event, yeah, it was just kind of
Well,
like a
does
quick
Dragnet-
joke.
I'm trying to remember. I think Dragnet at the
Yeah.
end does an explanation. It's been a long time since I've watched
Yeah.
Dragnet. But they do like
Yeah,
the
but-
dun 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 dun, and the people will show their like mugshots and they explain what happened. So maybe it is. Maybe there is an act break in like Dragnet.
I don't know. I hated Dragnet, so I never watched it. I like the movie.
Oh, the movie is fantastic.
I was trying to figure out, and we've talked about this in a past episode not that long ago, but I can't remember if Dragnet was the one that had the huffing paint episode, which was like this like famous episode of
Yeah, I think that's
TV.
Dragnet.
Yeah, I think it is.
Anyways, to go forward, Frank has two men set up in these like positions where Ralph and Jim were in the credit union, and there's like like kind of like a string from the gun to where Jim was standing to kind of see the trajectory of the bullet. And he's just trying to like get all the angles right and figure out like if this is plausible. But then he has the man actually shoot, and it kills the guy who's standing in Jim's spot, and like he dies. And then another man steps up right after that into the same spot, and then like they're continuing to check things. Only like the gunman changes the angle of the gun and shoots again and kills this guy as well.
I love this so much because I'm a huge like fanatic of cop movies
Murders?
and cop TV shows, especially from back then. And you can always see, like, especially in like Charles Bronson movies and stuff, right? Like by the time you hit the 80s, they really start pushing all of the like, hey, this is interesting. Like CSI is interesting because it is, but we all know what that stuff is now. But when it started becoming new, when they were like, what do you mean blood typing, right? Like they were like, oh, okay. Or like the things where they show the string coming out. Like it's an interesting thing that they overdid once that was like a thing people knew how to do. So I love that they set you up for that and then just bait and switch you and just shoot real people. Like, what is happening?
I love that you used the Charles Bronson voice to say that.
Well, I was thinking of his movie 10 to Midnight, where there's a whole DNA blood typing thing.
And then after that second guy goes down, you get like a couple different shots where Frank's like off on his own trying to like figure out like what's going on. But you keep seeing guys get shot and like falling past him in the background as he's trying to like hypothesize like what happened in this credit union before. And now it's like hours later and you just see like a stack of bodies behind him as he's talking on the phone. So in order to find out how two men died, about 6 or 7 men had to die just to figure out the angle of bullets.
It's also dark that they had to somebody stacked them. Like they didn't fall and then dig shot and then jump 5 feet onto the next guy.
Right.
Like somebody then stacked all the bodies up.
Well, if they were all standing in the same spot, they would have landed on top of each other.
That's also true.
That's true, but they were very neat.
Yeah, this was, and they're all like face down. So they were there was a
If
stack.
I was to stack bodies, I would do it 2 this way, 2 that way, going up like Jenga.
Oh, like
Like
sometimes you
Lincoln
do
Log,
that when
Dead guy
you're.
Jenga.
Yeah,
It's
like
actually
Lincoln
an
logs.
effective way to set up logs too when you want to have a fire. You
Yeah.
build like a little box.
And humans burn. Fat burns quick.
Yeah. Okay. So, anyways, so yeah. So we cut to Frank heading outside to get his shoes shined, and he asked the man what the word around town is, and he slips him a little bit of money. And now the shoe shine guy starts telling him a little bit about the homicide, and tells him that he's barking up the wrong tree with Ralph, and kind of same sentiment we heard earlier when they were talking about him with the captains, that he's like a good family guy. It's definitely not him.
So this is just like such a old cop show trope. They always have the guy in the street, he's like a shoe shiner or like a newsboy or something.
And he
They're
just
on
knows
all these
everything
shows.
going on around town just from just being out in the street all
They
day.
have their ear to the
Yeah.
ground for all of it.
Yeah.
Also, the character's name is Johnny the Snitch, which I just think is such a good name for a character.
And he's the one who's telling him like how Sally used to go with this guy named Joe Serlos, and until she started getting involved with numbers and got caught up in a bunch of scams. And then for like a few more bucks, he tells Frank where he can find Serlo. And then Frank walks off, and then like a priest walks into the spot next to get his shoes shined. And he's like, what do you know about life after death? He's like, I don't know anything about it. And then the priest hands him some money, and he's like, you talking existential being or anthropomorphic deity?
This is
I
a
thought that
fun
was
little
funny.
way to, like, if you're gonna put somebody else on it to ask a question, that's perfect. I don't remember if they recur this gag or not, but it's a good gag to have.
Agreed.
Trying to think like if there was there are always like the guys who seem to know everything about everything going on. It's like how does such information get leaked around? Like it's like public knowledge, but it's not, you know?
I would
The man of the
imagine
people.
well, look at social media.
Well, that's
Right?
a lot easier to spread info now, but the idea like back then it's like the role of like that shoe shine guy, that did exist in life, you know, even though it's being played for comedy. But the idea of like,
is like he's there, these people are getting their shoes done and they're talking to their friends and stuff, and
yeah, so they just always listening in.
collecting information all day long.
Also, like a bartender, right? Like, we've all been at bars before where the person next to you is just like telling their whole life story to the bartender, and they're sort of sitting there glassy eyed, like, okay, yeah, okay, like,
well,
I'm
you
sure
know
you
what
just
it
tell the
is?
same.
And not just that, it's, you know, thinking about it too, it's, for the way you're talking about it, kind of makes sense in a way where people, I think, inherently, and I'm not agreeing with it, but like this guy's performing a service, right? He's just a man working. So if you're getting your shoe shined and your buddy's there and you're talking to him, people like kind of forget that these are actual human beings, like at times, and like they're just performing a service. So you're speaking freely, like forgetting that you're like giving up your secrets to somebody nearby because you're not thinking about them in that way. Much like almost say two men were side by side getting a massage and they'd be speaking to one another, and like the masseuse is there and can hear and can obtain information, but you're not thinking about that in the moment. You're just talking to your friend. And you're not thinking that like, what?
Two masseuse.
No, one in the middle, and he's just one hand on each.
Was he just going skiing?
Maybe he's an octopus and he's getting like 10 people.
Baraka is standing in the middle, just giving out two massages at once.
My next question is, how often are you going to get group massages with people?
Not
Yeah,
group, but the idea of two tables in a single room is not weird. Like couples massages is a thing.
I have never been at a massage parlor where I wanted another guy in a room.
Yeah, well, you go to a very specific kind of massage parlor, so I think it's a little different than what we're trying to speak about here.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, there is a website called Tug Maps
Oh god.
that you can look up.
Rub maps.
Rub Maps. It's Rub Maps. Thank you.
What's the other weird fucking thing you brought up recently
Oh
too?
no.
I love that Gordo knew it enough to correct me that I said the wrong website about Rub and Tug.
What was the other
My
one?
wife in the background again.
You mentioned something not long
He got
ago.
himself in trouble
Joe.
again.
Joe, what was the other thing that you had mentioned like that not too long ago?
Yeah, Joe,
about
you had
burning people.
mentioned
No, it was another weird like map of where
No,
to get. Wasn't it another like map of
it
massage
was
parlors?
it was tug tube or
I don't think it was TugTube, but
Why
you were
don't
just
I
talking the other
remember
day about
this?
how you don't want to give your ideas away for free. Keep TugTube under your hat.
I don't know
no,
if that was
Joe,
going to
you
pop
had
off anyway. So
specifically- you literally specifically mentioned this like 2 or 3 episodes ago. I want to say, how about
was-
this
it
contest?
was like
time.
it was like Rubhub or something like that.
Yeah, Rubhub. That was
Rubhub.
it.
That might be it. Doesn't sound familiar though. But then again, things go in and out of this so quick that it's hard to remember sometimes.
You said you think about it like once a day.
Joe says he thinks about everything once a day. If you counted the amount of times Joe says, I quote this like once a week, Joe would have to literally speak in nothing but movie quotes 24/7 to get all those out.
Well, put some cameras and some audio on me. That's pretty much everything. That's how I speak when I'm not on a call.
From here, we get to a new scene, and we cut back to Frank later in the night driving again. And again, you see that he has like this laundry basket next to him. So he probably had the urge to look at some naked ladies real quick.
Dead
This
naked
is my
ladies.
low key. My favorite line in this entire episode is right here when he says, "One of those all-night wicker places."
Yeah.
One of those all-night wicker places is so fucking funny.
So you get to this place because he's looking for that Surlo guy that Sally was dating for a while. And yeah, it's at this place called like the World of Wicker, the all-night wicker place, which is like, it's made to look almost like a club, like a 24-hour club, but it's just people buying wicker goods. And
I love how he's sweeping outside too.
well, he has a nice broom with all that wicker.
Rattan piece feels terribly out of place.
And it's one of those scenes too where the whole scene was actually just done with narration. So we see him talking to Surlo, but you never hear what they're saying specifically other than what he's telling you that they're talking about. And basically this is like, in this scene, we're just at the exterior of the wicker place. This is when he finds out that Sally has this debt with the orthodontist that we already know about from the opening scene. And that she's been going to someone named Dr. Robert Zabatsky. And that ends up being the next place that he's going to head over to. So now we're inside the doctor's office. and you just see like a lineup of kids. It pans across, and it's like each kid has like headgear on, and like kind of it gets like worse and worse from each kid as they all have this like thick metal braced mouthpieces on. And did you guys read one of those kids was David Schwimmer, and that was his television debut?
No.
Ding, 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 ding.
Anybody seen Rachel? That's why he talks like that.
Yeah.
It's because he got all that
Bad
dental work.
orthodonty.
Zabatsky was not the best dentist.
You could say he was Zabadsky at his job.
I'll give you that one. That's all. I'm all for that one.
Nope, I will not give him that one.
You should have went silent.
Yeah, but at least you got one this time, Gordo. So better than normal.
This whole scene just reminds me of The Simpsons, the big book of British smiles. Like that's what it feels
Yes,
like
it
we're
does.
going right across on. Did you notice what Leslie Nielsen's reading while he's in the office chair too?
I actually
No.
didn't catch that, which you would almost expect there'd be something there. So I should.
Yeah, I assumed there had to be. He's reading a magazine called Veterinary Research, which is one of the magazines that's just hanging out at the children's orthodontist office.
Well, all right. So they get donated magazines. It's not crazy.
It's also not a children's one because the.
Oh, Sally
the
went
woman
there. Yeah,
goes
so it's his family dentistry.
Okay, I guess that's true. Yeah, there's gonna be kids and adults.
But they specifically say he's an orthodontist. And
Yeah.
typically orthodontists work on teenagers.
Is that
Well,
a
not
thing?
typically. I mean, you could have problems
Well,
with your teeth
who
and
gets
you an
braces,
orthodontist when you're an
Jay?
adult.
These days, it's a little more common. I agree with you. Back then, you didn't see many adults with braces.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
stuff
No.
like that.
Now,
I guess 40 years ago.
yeah. Now adults get braces.
Especially with them Invisalign things.
I don't know about you guys, but the idea of like reading something waiting in the doctor's office, like it takes me back to when I was a kid and they have all like those
Highlights?
highlight magazine. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that was like fun. It was like fun to like go through those and like play the little games inside those magazines.
I just remember reading 3.5-year-old Spin magazine or 3.5-year-old Rolling Stone or whatever. Like,
You're a weirdo. What are the highlights, man?
When you were a little kid?
no, not as a little kid. I mean,
Oh,
going to
yeah.
dentist office and doctor's office when there were still were magazines. Last one to the doctor, there was nothing. There were pamphlets. And that was it.
My old
Yeah.
barber, who I know Ferg went to for a little while too. He just had so many like golf magazines. I was like, what am I gonna do with this? And I actually golf now, but even as a golfer, I don't want to read golf magazines.
Better than
Actually,
the Playboys. Playboy is like a
apologize.
thing at barbershops.
Not
with
mine.
my experience.
Well, not the ones I've gone to. You look up people reading Playboys at barbershops. It's like a thing. It's an awkward thing, but it's a thing.
Oh, the dentist, like in Seinfeld.
That's true.
I also want to go back
Dr.
a
Watley.
second. Apologize for even calling myself a golfer. I'm someone who goes golfing, but I'm far from a golfer. So I don't want to give anyone the wrong impression that I'm actually capable of doing it properly. So Joe, you read Playboys at the barber?
Yes. But on my phone, I have a digital subscription. He doesn't like it very much, but I do it anyway.
What
Are
happens
they
is
back to showing boobs and stuff?
Yeah, I think that was a failed experiment once
Hefner's son took over. or
I think it was his
daughter.
daughter took over.
His daughter, and Hef was still alive for that too. It was
Yeah,
like,
but
oh,
I think
we're
at that
gonna
point,
just-
Hef was kind of like I don't know
Right.
if he was, really making decisions anymore.
Bring the
Is
tits
that
back
him,
or you're
like-
off the will.
Yeah.
Joe, was that the impression of him motorboating Playboy
I think
models?
it was him being cuckoo.
Yeah, it was cuckoo bananas.
So at that point, I mean, I understood the logic, right? They were like, well, we're just gonna. People are consuming
Boobs.
nudity through the internet now, so they don't need to buy these magazines anymore. So let's just turn our magazine into like Maxim and and have all these other
Make it more of
things.
like a lifestyle magazine. Yeah,
you
you'll
can
sell
find
more.
that shit online too. So what's the?
But to be fair, an old
fair?
roommate of mine had a subscription to Playboy and would leave it in the
Was it Joe? You used to
bathroom.
live with Joe.
I didn't used to live with Joe.
Let's not
Joe and
use
I-
names because I think I know who you mean.
I know exactly who
Um,
you mean.
Yeah,
This person
so
was a roommate
Joe-
of mine also, but
Yes,
Gordon and I never lived
exactly.
together.
It's a shared roommate of both Joe and I, and but he used to leave him in the bathroom, and when you're taking a dump, you get nothing else better to do. I think this is pre smartphones. The articles in Playboy are actually pretty good.
They were
Okay,
always known
don't
to have
give me
decent
that.
articles. It was always a joke.
I do it
but-
for the articles thing. No,
But no, there was really
you were looking
good
at a titty.
journalism.
I'll tell you this.
Of course, you were looking at titties
I'll
too.
tell
but
I'll tell you the name off there because you guys would all know him. But A friend of ours once, I remember taking a bus to like New York,
I was on that trip as well. I know exactly what
and
you're
a friend
talking
like a friend bought a Playboy to like read on the bus, and I was like uncomfortable by proxy.
That's
You can't-
weird. That's
You
aggressive.
can't read
It was
that
the,
on the
it was
bus.
the Meet the
No.
Parents girl one.
Yeah, it was.
I like that was
You're
such a
right.
traumatizing thing. You remember who was in the Playboy.
I just remember being like, you can't read that. It's like, I'm just reading it. It's like, but you can't on a bus. It's not okay.
You gotta
But,
buy another magazine to put
You
over
buy
it.
like a
Yeah.
bigger
Just have
magazine
some
to slide it
decorum.
into.
But to go
Cover
forward.
with the dust cover for Grade Sports Almanac.
So the receptionist slides the door open and pops her head out to tell Frank that he's up next. And Frank's like, he's just going in for a checkup with the doctor. This is kind of a way to get in. And after he heads to the room, we see that the woman's just holding that small slider in front of her face. Like,
Yeah,
it's like, it wasn't like, she wasn't actually sliding a door open to like a wall. She's just holding something that's, I don't know, maybe
like a
about
window.
it's like 2 feet by 1 feet in front of her face and just slides it open. Like,
The
Yeah, it's
physical
like that
comedy
shit
in this
from,
scene is pretty
From
fantastic.
Beetlejuice.
I'll say, like we've talked about how they do, like they go from subtle to wacky. This was the most goofy of the physical stuff I think we see is
Yeah,
with
for
that
sure.
thing. That was like the least believable thing, and maybe something that's a little bit more when I said like the movies got a little goofier. I feel like you
Yeah.
could have seen this in the movies more than you would have expected from this episode.
This is like an Airplane. Okay, this reminds me a lot of Airplane. I know that it's the same people, but I don't know why this specifically like brought me to Airplane.
I think him sitting in the chair is very reminiscent of all the scenes where they're talking to Ted in the airplane seat. Like it's shot the same way. Like, you know, I think it's probably like,
Yeah.
it's like triggering, and there's tons of comedy. Like when the girl's hanging herself and they come back, like it just makes you, it looks the same.
So when he's in the office, like you guys are mentioning, he's talking to the doctor real quick. The doctor's like getting an impression of his teeth, and he's like, all right, I'll be right back. And he leaves, and this is like, this scene I thought was great because it was a lot of great physical comedy here from Leslie Nielsen. He's sitting in the chair, and he has like, that like, I don't know what it's called, but that thing that like sucks all the saliva out of your mouth when you're doing stuff like that in the dentist chair.
The spit sucker.
So yeah, so it's in his mouth, but then he's trying to like move forward to like go to the file cabinet that's next to the chair. And when he does it kind of like fish hooks his mouth at first and like holds him back. So he pulls it out, then he gets to the cabinet and he opens it up. When he looks down because it's not in there anymore, he just starts leaking spit into the files.
The leaking of the spit is so fucking funny. It is such a good gag. And he has so much stuff in his mouth every time they cut. They must have just poured like a mouthful of stuff into him.
And he's just kind of going back and forth now where he'd have to like, that happens. So then he runs and gets the thing and throws it back in his mouth to like get all the saliva out. And then he'll go and look at the files again. But after a minute, it builds up and he starts leaking again. It was really good physical comedy. And the way he went back and forth, I don't know. I thought that was really good.
I love too in doing this that he pulls out the files and the files aren't wet. Like I love that sort of thing in a movie like this where everything would be splattered and gross, right? But like the one thing he needs is pristine and the camera reads it perfectly.
Well, doesn't in one of those spit things, doesn't it go like right into the filing cabinet too?
Yeah, like directly in, like a whole mouthful
Yeah, like
of
directly, like they poured water in it, and it's all like bone dry.
And through doing this, he does find Sally's file, and he can see on it that her debt is completely paid off now. And when the doctor returns, after he puts everything away and sits back down, he's trying to ask about her. But he's like completely inaudible. So when Frank's talking, it's just like, but like but
Good.
but the dentist can understand him. So he's like, so he's reacting as if, he's speaking clearly. He's like, oh, that name rings a bell talking about Sally. He's like, but I can't really remember her. And then Frank's asking a little bit more. And then finally he cracks and mentions like what was wrong with their teeth. And Frank like gets up and pins him to the wall. And the doctor is like, and he's asking the doctor more questions. And you still can't understand a fucking, like a word he's saying. And there's spit flying all over this poor dude's mouth. I felt so bad because in an acting standpoint, like there's no way around it. This is coming out of his mouth and just spraying him in the face the whole time.
And this whole thing is set up just to do an Elephant Man joke.
Yeah, because he tells Frank, he doesn't want any trouble and that he's going to cooperate. He's like, my God, you're an animal. And then,
I'm not an animal.
I'm a human being.
Which is pretty topical. That wasn't that old at that point, right? It's only a couple years.
No, yeah, it was probably right around there.
Is that what that's from?
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's see. Elephant Man.
Never saw that movie.
Classic.
Yeah, it's like is it the first David Lynch movie? I want to say Anthony Hopkins.
No.
It's good.
I'll have to check it out, I guess.
I just remember like the rumor in like the late 80s, early 90s that like Michael Jackson owned the Elephant Man's bones.
I bought his bones. Yeah.
I mean, that tracks.
I mean, to be fair, if somebody said that they found out that was true, you'd be like, of course. Yeah, like
Yeah,
you wouldn't be like,
yes.
oh no. You just take a break from staring at children's buttholes to look at bones for the day.
So now in the next scene, Frank's driving back to the squad and we're getting more narration from him. And he's saying all these pieces are starting to point towards Sally, but he still like needs more for conviction. And when he gets to the squad, him and the captain like meet up in an elevator to talk, and Frank's telling him how Sally paid off her debt one day after the double killing. She's been seeing that doctor for years and she's always been behind in her payments, and then all of a sudden the day after these two guys die, she has all the money and pays off this guy. So, you know, they're pulling it all together at this point. But during that elevator scene, you have like a girl who's like a swimmer get in the elevator. You never see it from the front. She like backs into it, and then the elevator goes up. The doors open. They're at like an outdoor pool. She walks out and like there's this big pool party thing going on. Door shuts again. Another like goofy gag.
This
is
almost
the
felt like
most
Muppet
Naked
Babies.
Gun joke.
You know, Muppet Babies where they'd open the closet door, and we talk about this sometimes too, and they're just like weird like World War II German Nazi footage of people marching, and they're like, wait, why did they do that? This felt like that to me.
For something that's so obscure in the Muppet Babies, Joe's mentioned this in so many episodes. Like
It's
it's
like
really
burned in my brain.
Yeah,
It's so
I
weird.
burned in.
No. I'll give Joe this.
No,
that was so jarring.
It's jarring and very weird.
Understood.
I remember they opened the door to Spider-Man before. That was a little less weird.
Kind of makes me think of like similar but not really in Wayne's World, when they open up the door and it's like
Action
the
movie scene.
the
Training.
action movie.
That scene must have cost Wayne's World so much extra money for that
What do
movie.
you-
Like, the budget for the day to have all of those special effects and all those extra people for 1 second gag. I love that shit.
What are you gonna do with those guys?
So it cuts to Frank at his desk and he's making a call, and he's using a cloth over the phone to mask his voice, and he's calling Sally, claiming to be Dr. Zavatsky. And when he starts to speak, you know, when you see him, he's not doing anything to like mask his voice other than the fact that there's just like a piece of cloth over the phone. But when it cuts over to her, like listening from her perspective, it's Zavatsky's like voice, like exactly. And she's like, you know, she's telling him that they're through, that, you know, she's paid off and she's already made an appointment with another orthodontist. Like, how fucked up is this girl's teeth, by the way?
It's her kids.
Oh, is it her kids?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she mentions in the beginning of the episode that she's got, like, her kids' bill.
Okay.
Guess I missed that.
Yeah, I didn't catch that part. I just
I'm
assumed
like
it was her.
99% certain, but if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I thought
Yeah.
that's what she said.
In
They
any
also say
event,
about 10
yeah.
million words in this 30-minute
Right.
episode, so I could have been mistaken.
So, yeah, one way or another, he mentions that, you know, yeah, I do have your money and it's marked and traceable. And then tells her to, you know, meet me in a half hour. So when he heads out, you see that police squad's written on the door, but in a weird way that is visible if you were to walk into the room, but squad would be mirrored. But if you're inside, police would be backwards and squad's written forward.
Like a weird visual gag for no reason.
Yeah, because it's not even like, it's not that funny.
No,
Like,
it's just
like-
absurdist.
Throw 1,000 jokes at the wall.
Yeah.
Some stick, some don't.
And when he steps out, apparently he steps into some sort of a trap because a rope hoists him by his leg, and you like, you don't.
Because he tells him to watch his step.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because because he says she's already killed 2 men, Frank. Watch yourself. She's a, you know, it could be a trap.
Yeah,
And
but
then
why
he
is there a
walks
trap?
in-
And that trap seems to be
Because he wasn't watching himself.
But who set up that trap? That wasn't her.
Again,
He's-
this is mile-a-minute comedy. Some of
Yeah.
it sticks, some of it doesn't, but they just keep going.
And you don't see him like physically, like you see his silhouette through the door.
Yeah.
Hanging up by one leg, yeah.
We cut to the corner now where Frank told Sally to meet him. And Sally's surprised when she sees Frank pop up because, like, remember, she's thinking it's the doctor because of his cloth that made him sound like the doctor. And he has her sit down, like, on a bench with him. And he's telling her how he thinks that she's the killer. And she's, like, crying and saying how it's not true and how she's never been in any trouble. He's like, yeah, that's right. Sally Decker has no record, but Sally was formerly known as Babs Caltrain, notorious gun runner in Memphis. Only difference is, Babs has red hair. And he pulls her hair off, and you see that she's a redhead. The gag continues because he keeps going over other aliases that she had before that and keeps pulling her hair off as if every time she creates a new alias, she just adds another wig and never just removes it. It just puts one new wig on. So
one of the names is Zazu Pitts, and I don't know why I find that so funny, but that is the best fake name ever.
I'll say this, the first time I saw her, I thought her hair looked fake in the very first scene.
Oh, I didn't
think much of it at that time because,
Yeah.
the hairstyle was like on point for around then. So
Yeah. It looked like she had old lady hair. It was like white. It wasn't blonde or anything. Like, it doesn't look like real hair.
imagine if
Good eyes.
she actually had that many wigs on at once, like how hot that would be to have like,
under stage lights.
yeah. And then she pulls a gun on him and he like manages to slap it away. So she tosses one of the wigs on his face and he screams like she just poured acid all over his face.
Like it was like a dog attacking him.
Also, before that, the last wig he pulls off and the last character he said she plays,
Oh, yeah.
and before that, you were a backup singer for Aretha Franklin. And he pulls her wig off and she has an afro. And I was on the floor. Like, this is so stupid, but it was so funny.
Naked Gun. O.J. Simpson.
The wig to the face was actually used in one of the Naked Guns as well.
Are you saying that Aretha Franklin is O.J. Simpson?
No, but remember in
Yeah,
Naked Gun,
the bit
with
where
the
he couldn't get through the doorway.
Right, yeah.
No, that was a big hat. That wasn't his bro.
I thought it was
I
an
thought
afro.
that was an afro.
He has an afro in one scene, but the scene you're talking about, he has a big hat. It gets stuck in the doorway.
Huh. We'd have to
Big
check
hat,
the
it's
tapes.
funny.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm team afro here.
I'm not 100% sure I remember it one way, but I'll Google it later.
Also, speaking of hats real quick, the building they're in front of in the scene, it's two separate stores. One is army hats, and one is military millinery, which is a female hat, which is just like, somebody must have thought of like an alliteration joke that day or like liked an old-timey word, and they went as far as to put that in the background and not even reference it. Like, that's how dense this is.
So she manages to like use the time once the wig's thrown on his face to get behind a trash can and grabs another gun. And now the two are having like a shootout. He's hiding behind that bench that they were sitting on. And it goes on for like a few seconds until eventually the perspective changes. And then from the shot, we can see that they're like maybe 3 feet apart from one another. And like they're so close that it makes the amount of shots that have gone back and forth insane because they've failed to hit each other from basically point blank range. He pulls out a megaphone that he brought with him.
I've always wanted one.
Tells her that she's surrounded and has to surrender. And now they're just like throwing shit at each other for a second. And she goes
They're throwing guns at each other, and every time they throw a gun, it makes the bullet shot noise.
Oh, was it guns? Like, I couldn't tell if they were guns.
Yeah,
that they were throwing.
yeah, because they ran out of bullets.
But they're throwing multiple empty guns at each other, and every time they throw one, it goes like, pew!
Oh, I didn't catch that.
She goes to make a run for it, but then that squad car pulls up and stops her. And then this is when you get another one of those like wordplay with the names. It's like, all right, Sally, you're under arrest. Sergeant, take her away and book her. And then we find out that the two sergeants are Sergeant Take Her Away and Sergeant Booker. Names of two people.
Such a good joke. I love that they like hammer that one in the whole episode. This next scene, I feel like, was something that killed both Gordo and Ferg.
Well, yeah, it's like I know you got Sally's record from R&I, but how did you know that she handled the loan office heist? And it's like, oh, just a little hunchback in the office. And then like, thought so. I brought that little hunchback with me, and the little hunchback runs out.
I love that everybody has crazy names. It's so much funnier to me too. They bring out a hunchback and they just goes, "Thanks, Charlie." Like, why is his name just Charlie?
Oh, by the way, so you don't have to look it up. You were right about the OJ thing. I did what I said you did. There is a scene of him with a big hat, but him getting stuck in the doorway is with the afro.
That's what I thought.
So I mixed them up instead of you.
So Gordo was right.
Yeah,
I should have bet. That's when I should have bet.
No, you didn't. You fucked up.
I would love to know what terrible show you would pick to torture us with.
It's a pot calling the kettle black there, Joe.
I never pick shows to torture you. I pick genuinely good shows that you just happen to not like.
You've said in the past you picked shows to torture me.
But I still liked them. It wasn't like I did my only reason for that. I love Mama's
Country
Family.
Comfort.
Well, that was the reason we have a show.
Yeah,
Like,
Country
if you
Comfort
ever
was
wanna go
like
back.
the impetus, so we had to do it.
But if you were to go back and like, for those of you who have been listening, for the last 2+ years now, Joe's like just general taste is just different than Ferg. So a lot of shows that Joe picks, Ferg doesn't like. Gordo admittedly will Google like worst sitcoms of all time and select from that list. So it's a very different thing that's happening.
Hence
Joe
things
does-
like Homeboys from Outer Space that we were stuck watching.
Listen, that is a gem of a show.
Listen, I'm glad we covered it. And if you guys want to go back and listen to Homeboys in Outer Space, I mean, we did an episode on it.
Just think about how many shows you would never ever, and I will say that about this show, about our show. I would never watch like almost 90% of the shit that you guys pick. I just wouldn't watch it.
Listen, I mean, the irony of me hosting a show about TV shows, and you guys know how little television I watch, is like, not lost on me. So I've gotten to see at least an episode of so many shows I would have never watched. But in any event, we get to the epilogue, and this is kind of the final scene. And Frank just got back to the squad from the arraignment, and he has like so many bullets attached to him at that moment. Like he looked like Rambo, like under
he
his
looks
jacket.
like a bandolier.
And
Yeah, he didn't have that one scene earlier, huh?
right. And we find out that Sally's going to jail, and that tall guy walks back up, and he's eating a banana. So you just see like the banana in his hand, and like during like the dialogue, he's like, "Oh, you have something on your face," to the tall dude. And like, it's like, "Oh no," he's like wiping his face on the other side. And then he wipes the other side of his face. And then just, I don't know, about a third of a banana just plops on the table.
It's
so
funny,
weird.
but it doesn't make any sense.
No, it's just
You
real
know what?
weird.
You know what I love with the joke though? It's like he says there's something he could have done that, and the banana could have instantly fell. He goes to the wrong side, and then he goes the other side, and then it does. So it's like it's played just normal. Like if you had something on your face, you wouldn't get it in the right spot right away.
It's like, weirdly, you always go to the wrong side when someone says that to you.
But usually it's not a chunk that weighs like, like a significant amount that you would feel it weighing your face down. And how would you even get a chunk that big of banana stuck to your face?
See, for
Yeah,
one
'cause
of
you're
us,
biting.
it would just be a smudge, but for him, because he's big, a whole banana. That's how.
Okay.
Oh,
I
true.
see the logic there now. I didn't see the logic there. It makes sense to me now.
So after that banana chunk falls off, he walks away. And the captain's asking Frank how he knew that money that Sally gave the doctor was traceable. He's like, "I didn't, but she didn't either." And then the two kind of like, they're not actually laughing. They just kind of like deliberately pose as if they're laughing to do the freeze frame so they can run the end credits, which is funny in itself because they knew that it was like, in the style of like parody, it makes sense to do that.
But it's not a real freeze frame. They're just standing
No, they
still.
stay live, like frozen.
The best part about that to me is
laughing.
Leslie Nielsen tries his hardest to be frozen and to not even blink, and does a pretty good job of it. But Ed just is like can't handle it. He's blinking a bunch. He's spazzing. It's so much funnier than trying to do it right.
I think they did that on purpose because if they stayed completely still, you wouldn't know it wasn't a freeze frame.
Oh, you would still know.
True.
It's very obvious.
Unless like the gag would be if they did a good job, you have to have like a picture fall in the background or something like that.
Yeah, that's true. You have to have something
that would
go
have
on in
been
the
way
background.
better.
A big chunk of banana falls.
Yeah, just more banana falls from the
The
sky.
guy
We
on
should try
fire
that.
runs through the screen again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Abraham Lincoln comes through.
But yeah, that's the entirety of the episode. And like I don't have a lot of other like notes about the show to say because it had such a small run. And really the only like big thing about it is that this is the reason we got the Naked Gun movies. And I'd said at the top of the episode, I knew that this was like the predecessor to the movies, but I didn't know until watching it that it's literally like the
It's
same
everything.
character and everything. Like I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have anything else you want to mention about the show. Like I said, I've pretty much exhausted everything I know about it.
Other things I want to say. One, the woman who plays Sally is in the Charles Bronson movie Assassination, which is a movie I very much love. She's also in Brannigan, which, if anybody ever wants to see, John Wayne did 2 like gritty, trying to be Dirty Harry movies that just do not work. And the one that she's in is one where he goes to like swinging 60s London, and it's amazing. But the one thing I want to say, I love this show But sometimes we watch shows like this where it just feels like things are just about to change so much that it doesn't work because of that. Like 1982, where like MTV, bright colors. I mean, even cop shows, Miami Vice is only 2 years away from this, and it's such a drastically different looking thing. I love this, and I think they like weirdly were able to update it later on to make it look a little more of the current time. And I think
like
that's why those movies worked a little bit more.
That they made 3 Naked Guns, and then after that they made other parodies like Wrongfully Accused.
That's the thing. I mean, you're right in that they did such a good job of parodying that style, but that style was going away like soon thereafter. So I can understand in that regard that it was almost like just a smidge too late by the time they decided to do this show.
Yeah, but then they like figure out the winning formula to just keep it going and always work. I mean, what year is Spy Hard? Like 1998?
I forgot about Spy Hard.
Yeah, and then Weird Al's head blew up.
Yeah, Weird Al singing the theme song. The theme from Spy Hard.
But yeah, at this point, I guess there's not much else to do other than do the green light or cancel. I'll go in the order I'm seeing you guys in. Gordo, starting with you.
This is probably one of the easiest green lights I think I've ever given on this show. This is right up my wheelhouse of humor. I absolutely love Leslie Nielsen. I don't know what else to say. This is a perfect... This show brings joy to me. And I want to go back and find all the other episodes. Speaking of that, can we find this anywhere, Jay?
If I'm being honest, I don't know if it's available like to view on streaming anywhere.
I did look it up. You can buy the Blu-ray of the whole season for like $15.
And then I found it available for download through some places, and that was very easy to find. That way. So like usually when that happens, for those of you who use like alternate things to watch stuff, like if you have like Jailbroken stuff, like all those kind of alternate sites to watch movies, usually if you can find something for download that easy, it's available on those. And pretty accessible. As far as like an actual streamer like a Netflix or a Hulu, I don't think it's on anything like that right now.
Okay.
But it's tough. Right. It's one of those, like we talk about it, it's difficult in that there's only there's 6 episodes. So there's not a lot of meat on the bone to like pay for the price. Like, are you going to get your money back by acquiring this, So I get it.
I mean, it did air on a network at one point, and it was again syndicated because it was.
Yeah, it was an ABC show. So I don't know if they still have the rights, but they did.
In this world of streaming, it's one of those things where like, how little bandwidth is it going to take up to put 6 episodes on your servers? Right. I don't understand why this stuff doesn't get put somewhere.
But
we need to crowdfund that. But green light but to get back to the main point, green light from Gordo.
And so to move on, Joe.
I think what do you say about this? I think Gordo's completely right. This is it's funny. It's kind of wild they were able to put so much into 25 minutes of this show. And I wish more things would be like this now, because I want there to be more things that make you feel like you have to watch and you can't look at your phone for 2 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, to actually get you so engaged into something. It's sad to me that it didn't go on more than 6 episodes, but I think probably because of that is why we got the 3 movies that we all love so much. So for being the forebearer of Nordberg, this is like the biggest green light ever.
Bert.
Yeah, I gotta stick with the boys here. I will never cancel anything with Leslie Nielsen. Show's perfect. I laughed, like I said, from the second I saw the guy on fire, and that was in the intro to the end. Like, every scene had at least one thing that made me laugh. Some of the jokes were goofy and cartoony, which I love, and then some of the jokes were smart, which I also love. Everything was done perfect. From like the well done parody, I love deadpan. Green light.
Yeah, so I'm not here to rock the boat with you guys, but I'll be honest, when the show was initially picked and like I'm looking at it, and as much as I love Leslie Nielsen, I had a feeling I wasn't going to like the show, but I don't know why. I just thought like it would be too slow or old or just outdated. I don't know what it was, but my expectations were really low, and I was very, very pleasantly surprised when I went to watch it. And it is one of those shows that I'm like, there's only 6 episodes. So in one regard, me as someone who doesn't watch a lot of television, I'm like, great, this is like something I can like bang out in a day and be done with. But then also I'm like, there was so much meat on the bone here. They could have did so much with it and didn't have the opportunity. And, but yeah, I did not repeat everything everyone else has said. It's a green light for me. I really enjoyed it. So Nick's vote we won't know until he tells us, and we'll have a graphic available on our Instagram, which will be at S1E1 Pod. And you can check that out later in the week. But it kind of doesn't matter because we already have a 4 out of 4. So regardless of which way he votes, it's already a green light from us. So congratulations to Police Squad. Even though ABC thought you deserved a very short run, we're going to at least continue you on to episode 2. So thanks to everyone who listened this week. Again, go to S1E1pod.com, S1E1pod on Instagram and Twitter. We love engaging with you guys, so hit us up. Let us know what shows you want to hear us do. But that's all the time we have for this week. We'll catch you again next week with another new episode. Thank you. Goodbye.
I know we got the best OJs. Zazu Pits.